I wasn't always the guy mopping up spilled soda at 2 in the morning while talking myself out of panic attacks. But life doesn't care about your plans, and neither do gas stations. My name's Caleb Mercer, 24 years old, 3 years into an engineering degree I was never sure I wanted. The day my dad had his stroke, I walked out of class, drove home, and didn't go back. 1 minute, you're scribbling equations on a whiteboard, and the next you're changing bed sheets in your childhood bedroom, while your old man slurs half-words at the ceiling fan. I tried to keep my head above water working part-time at a tire shop, but bills pile up fast when you've got student loans and no real plan. I took the Petromart job out of desperation. No background check, no interview, just a shrug from a guy named Casey and a key card. Petromart 24 sits at exit 89 off I-75, just outside Knoxville. 2 pumps, dusty security cameras, and a wall of off-brand energy drinks that'll kill you twice as fast as a real Red Bull. Nights were quiet, almost too quiet. That particular winter, the nights had teeth. Wind howled through the automatic doors if you didn't latch them right. By 1 a.m., even the truckers had moved on, and all that was left was buzzing fluorescents and the low, groaning hum of old freezer units. I'd been on shift since 10 p.m., wiped down the coffee machines, restocked the cigarettes, and just finished mopping up aisle 3 when the door chimed. In walked this man, maybe mid-30s, pale as drywall. He had those eyes, you know the kind. Empty, hollow, like he'd seen some real bad things and just never came back from them. He wore this faded red flannel stained at the cuffs, walked real slow like each footstep was a choice. I gave him the standard evening and a nod. He didn't respond, just started pacing through the store, not looking for anything in particular. Stood staring into the freezer for 5, maybe 6 minutes. I thought maybe he forgot why he came in, or maybe he was tweaking. When he came to the counter, he looked right at me, like just realized I existed, and said, "Thanks." Then he walked out. No purchase, no eye contact, no sense. Something in my stomach turned sideways. I pulled out my phone and texted my buddy Dylan. "Yo, creepy dude just came in." Said nothing. Eyes were dead. Walked out. I got a weird feeling. Dylan replied with a laughing emoji and a skull. That was the kind of friend he was. I chuckled too, but only for a second. At 2:14 a.m. on the dot, the bell chimed again. Same guy, same walk, but this time, his flannel was gone. He wore a black hoodie pulled low, face in shadows. His hands were stuffed in the front pocket. He didn't browse. He didn't speak. He just walked to the counter, slow and deliberate. I stepped back. My instincts screamed, "This ain't right." He stopped in front of me, reached into his hoodie, and pulled out a small silver pistol. Didn't point it. Didn't say, "Give me the money." He just laid it on the edge of the counter like it was a phone and said, calm as a Sunday sermon, "Can I get a pack of gum?" My mouth went dry. I scanned the gum. The beep felt like a gunshot. He dropped a few coins on the counter, nodded, took the gum, and walked out into the night. No robbery, no threat. Just a message. I locked the doors, flipped the deadbolt, something we technically weren't supposed to do. Then I stood there for maybe 10 minutes, just staring at the door like it owed me an explanation. You ever feel like your body knows something your brain doesn't? That's how it was. My spine was tight like a coiled spring. Every time the wind hit the glass, I twitched. It wasn't fear exactly, it was worse. Uncertainty. I couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger just happened, and I was too slow to realize it. 15 minutes later, a county sheriff rolled up in a mud-splattered SUV. Deputy Sanders. Bald, heavy-set, good old boy type. I told him what happened, showed him the footage. He watched in silence, then rewound it. "You say he didn't demand anything?" he asked. "Nope, just bought gum." "You sure that's a real pistol?" "I mean, it looked real." He didn't point it, but it was there. I saw it clear. Sanders exhaled through his nose and rubbed his forehead. "Well, technically, he didn't commit a crime unless he threatened you or tried to rob the place. Could be an airsoft for all we know." I stared at him. So, what do I do? You stay alert, and maybe keep your phone nearby. Helpful. After he left, I tried calling Casey, my manager. Straight to voicemail. Texted her a long message explaining everything. She didn't respond until 8:45 the next morning. That guy's probably on something. Don't overthink it. You good? Yeah, totally. I muttered to myself. I'm great. That day, I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that faint smirk, that silver pistol, the dead calm in his voice. And what got me the most? He paid. Full price. Exact change. Like he wanted me to remember this wasn't about money. It was about control. Over the next few weeks, I kept telling myself it was a one-off, some junkie on a weird trip. But the problem with trauma is it teaches your body to react before your brain can talk it down. Every night shift, I watched the door like a hawk. I kept the baseball bat from the storage closet propped under the counter. I asked Casey if we could install another camera outside the entrance. She brushed it off, said we didn't have the budget. Typical. About 10 days later, around the same time, 2:12 a.m. maybe, this teenage kid comes in. Skinny, hoodie, couldn't be more than 17. I tensed up before he even got to the counter. He asked for a Sprite. I gave it to him with shaky hands. Everything okay, man? He asked. Yeah, I lied. Long night. When he left, I leaned over the counter and dry heaved. The real damage wasn't what happened. It was what could have happened. That space between what you know and what you fear. That's where paranoia grows like mold. I started carrying a pocket knife. I'd flick it open and closed under the counter like some nervous tick. The customers never noticed, but it gave me some illusion of power. Dylan told me I should quit. Petromart's not worth it. Dude, you've had nightmares for 2 weeks, just bounce. I can't, I said. My dad's meds, rent, everything. I need this job. I didn't say it out loud, but there was more. Part of me needed to prove I could handle it. Like if I bailed, it meant that guy won, that he took something I couldn't get back. One Friday, just after 2, I saw a man in a hoodie pacing outside near the dumpster. Couldn't see his face. I killed the lights in the front, grabbed the bat, and waited. He never came in. When I finally peeked out through the crack in the door, he was gone. It's been 5 months now. I still work the night shift, but I see things differently. I installed a new lock on the back exit myself. I keep the bat closer. The anxiety's still there, but it's not as sharp. Just a low hum in the background. What stuck with me more than the gun was the look in that man's eyes. He wanted me to know he could have taken something from me if he wanted to. My life, my peace, my sense of safety. But he didn't. And that kind of power? That's terrifying. Now when people come in around 2 a.m. asking for gum or soda, my fingers twitch. Not from fear anymore, just awareness. I'm still here, still watching the door, still hoping that chime never rings the same way again. Not all threats are loud. Some whisper their way into your life just to see how much fear they can leave behind. But survival isn't always about fighting. It's about learning, adapting, and refusing to give away your peace for free. If I'm being honest, I didn't move to California to chase a dream. I moved to get away from the quiet disappointment I left behind in Nebraska. A dead-end relationship, a string of forgettable jobs, and a family that stopped asking questions because they were tired of my non-answers. Cybersecurity seemed like something that sounded important, sharp, modern. I wanted to be someone who mattered. I applied to DataCore Systems mostly because the listing said entry-level night shift analyst, and I figured no one else was fighting to work overnight in a tech park that went dark by 10 p.m. To my surprise, they hired me after one Zoom interview. 3 weeks later, I was living in a furnished studio in West Oakland, eating instant noodles and walking to work with pepper spray in my hand. The office was on the 15th floor of a mostly empty high-rise. It always smelled faintly of ozone and printer ink. Rows of cubicles, a couple server closets, an industrial kitchenette that looked like it hadn't seen a meal since 2015. I worked from 8 p.m. to 4 a.m., mostly monitoring traffic logs, updating firewall alerts, and reading internal tickets that rarely needed more than a copy-paste answer. The job was dull, isolating, and surprisingly well paid. The only other night shifter was Adam, a 50-something guy with thick glasses, a goatee, and the voice of someone who had long since stopped caring about small talk. He worked until midnight, then left me alone to carry the graveyard. That night, Thursday, March 11, 2021, started like every other. Adam clocked out with his usual grumble, "Be safe, kid," before disappearing into the elevator. I barely looked up from my screen. Around 12:55 a.m., I stood up to stretch and walked to the kitchenette. I had a ritual: make a fresh cup of coffee, pace a few steps, check my reflection in the microwave door, and then force myself back to the console. But that night, when I reached for the coffee machine, something stopped me cold. It was unplugged, neatly, deliberately. The cord coiled behind it like it had never been touched. I froze. I had made coffee at 11 a.m. I remembered watching the pot fill. I remembered pouring it into my chipped ceramic mug from home. So why was the machine unplugged now? I plugged it back in, more annoyed than scared. Probably just a cleaner being tidy. But something about it nagged at me, like a rock in your shoe you can't find. I turned to walk back to my desk, and that's when I noticed my phone was gone. Not misplaced, gone. It was always to the right of my mouse pad, screen down, notifications silenced. I patted my jacket pockets, checked under the desk, scanned the console tray. Nothing. I tried not to panic. Maybe I'd left it in the bathroom. Maybe I set it on Adam's desk without thinking. But when I checked both places, I came up empty. Then I heard it, faint, echoing from the far end of the floor past the cubicles. My phone's alarm. Not the default tone, but my custom one, the one I set to keep me awake after midnight. A soft, pulsing chime like a heartbeat underwater. It was coming from behind the storage partitions. My breath caught in my throat. That was when my instincts kicked in, and I ran. I didn't stop to think. I didn't pause to ask myself if I was overreacting. I bolted down the hallway, past the kitchenette, straight to the stairwell. The door's crash bar clanged behind me like a shot. My sneakers slapped against the concrete steps as I descended, 15 floors nonstop. By floor 10, my lungs were screaming. By floor 5, my knees ached. But I didn't stop. At ground level, I shoved open the exit and ran across the street to the Chevron station. The guy behind the counter was leaning over his phone, startled when I burst through the doors, breathless and shaking. "I need to use your phone," I gasped. "Please." He handed it over without a word. I called 911, told them someone was in my office, told them I worked the night shift, told them I didn't know who he was, only that my phone was gone and the alarm was ringing from somewhere no one should have been. The dispatcher was calm. Too calm. I waited outside while 2 black and white cruisers pulled into the lot 10 minutes later. I pointed up to the 15th floor, still winded. The officers took the elevator. I stood under a flickering street lamp, staring up at the dark windows. My body wouldn't stop trembling. About 15 minutes later, one of the officers came back down. He looked serious, not panicked, but his expression told me enough. "We found your phone," he said. "Partitions near the server room." It was inside a cardboard box behind a row of storage. I nodded slowly, unsure whether I felt vindicated or nauseous. "There was a man hiding in the same corner," he added. "Former employee, name's Harold Brenner. He still had his old keycard. Said he was trying to get something back." I couldn't even speak. They arrested him on the spot. He hadn't taken anything else, just my phone, but he'd been there. Watching. Waiting. The next morning, HR sent a mass email. "As of today, all legacy access cards are revoked. Please see facilities to receive new ones. We take security seriously and are investigating the breach." That was it. No mention of me. No acknowledgement that a woman was followed, watched, and nearly trapped. I was offered paid time off. I took it. The next 2 weeks were a blur of long showers, daytime sleep, and anxiety spiraling into nightmares. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those partitions, heard the chime, woke up with my heart thudding like I'd run those stairs all over again. Adam called once, left a voicemail. "Hey, I heard what happened. Sorry. You want to talk? I'm around. Take care." I didn't call back. The worst part was how much of it I couldn't explain. Why me? I'd never met Harold, never emailed him. HR later confirmed he'd been fired 6 weeks before I started. The theory was that he'd come back for a company-issued laptop. But if that was true, why not take it during the day? Why hide? Why unplug the coffee machine? Why take my phone? The questions looped in my mind until they stopped mattering. When I finally returned, everything looked the same. Same desks, same blinking routers, same hum of the server fans. But it wasn't the same. I didn't stay late anymore. I never left my phone unattended. I checked the storage partitions every hour. I told myself I was stronger now, smarter, but I also knew what it meant to feel hunted, even if nothing ever physically touched me. Sometimes at night, when things got quiet, I'd hear phantom sounds, footsteps that weren't there, that custom alarm tone, faint as if coming from behind a wall. I deleted it from my phone, changed the tone, but it still rang in my head. Adam eventually retired. The night shift became mine alone. I stuck with it because I didn't want fear to be the reason I left. But I also knew I was changed. I kept the job, transferred to a new location after a year. I still work in cybersecurity, but I don't glamorize it anymore. It's not about glowing blue screens and hackers in hoodies. It's about being alert, especially when the world gets quiet. I upgraded my home security. I don't ignore gut feelings, and I never leave my phone behind. Sometimes I still dream of that night, of footsteps behind me, of silence where someone was breathing, of hearing my alarm echo from a place it didn't belong. People ask what scared me most. It wasn't the man. It was the idea that someone could decide to rewrite your night, your sense of safety, without ever saying a word. Trust your instincts, even when nothing seems wrong on the surface. Fear doesn't need permission to be valid, and sometimes the smallest signs are the loudest warnings. I never wanted to work in retail. Honestly, I didn't want to work at all. Not in the way you do when you're 20 and your body still feels half asleep from high school burnout. But life doesn't really care what you want when the heat in your trailer's barely running and your mom's crying quietly over diner tips that won't stretch far enough. When Greenland Value Mart called me for the night stalker position, I didn't even ask about the pay. Just nodded, filled out the forms, and showed up at 10 p.m. with duct-taped sneakers and an anxiety knot in my throat that hadn't left in 2 years. Night shift was simple. That's what I liked. Clock in, don't talk, stock shelves, stay out of the way. We had a crew of maybe 4 after midnight, but most stayed in their own corners of the store. The only one who talked much was Darla, 50-something, divorced twice, smokes menthols like it's her job, grumpy but decent. She called me kid and never expected small talk. That was enough for me. Aisle 12 became my zone pretty quickly. Cleaning supplies, pet litter, mops, paper towels. It was one of the least trafficked aisles, even for our mostly empty graveyard shift. I kept my earbuds in, lo-fi music playing low enough to still hear if someone called for help over the store intercom. I didn't mind the silence. I preferred it. But then, that Saturday happened. It was November. Cold enough outside that every time the automatic doors opened, a blast of icy air curled through the entrance. I was midway through shelving new boxes of microfiber cloths, those 3-packs wrapped in thin plastic, when I caught a flicker of motion at the far end of the aisle. A man, long brown coat, walking past. I paused, pulled an earbud halfway out. I hadn't heard the door chime, which always dinged when customers entered. No footsteps, no cart squeaks. I moved to the aisle edge and peeked toward the front registers. Nothing. The floor was empty. Just the dull, yellowish lights reflecting off the polished linoleum. I went back to stocking, trying not to overthink it. Maybe it was another employee. Maybe someone came in during Darla's smoke break. I told myself I was tired, that I'd imagined it. But then I noticed the shelf. 3 microfiber cloth packs, gone. I had just stocked them. And on the floor, one of the plastic wrappers, crushed like someone tore it open and dropped it. No noise, no footsteps, no security alerts, just silence. That was the first time my stomach started to feel heavy, like something was leaning against me that I couldn't see. Then the store speaker cracked on. Not music, not Darla's voice, just a flat, calm male voice. You missed a spot. Clean it up. I froze. I looked around like an idiot, like I thought I'd catch someone behind me holding a mic. Nothing. Just the low hum of refrigeration from frozen foods, aisles stretching out in sterile emptiness. I dropped the rest of the cloths into the cart and made my way toward the front of the store, fast walking. The silence didn't follow me. It was already there. I found Darla out back, leaning against the brick wall behind the loading dock, cigarette in hand, phone glowing in her other. "You good, kid?" she asked when she saw my face. I told her someone had been in the aisle, that I heard something on the speaker system. Her eyes narrowed. "No one's in the store, just us. I checked the counters before I clocked out for break. You didn't fall asleep on the mop bucket, did you?" I laughed. Kind of. But I knew what I saw, and I knew what I heard. I went back inside and made my way to the monitor room, where the security feed looped through 12 low-res screens. I rewound the last 20 minutes. No man, no brown coat, nothing in aisle 12, except me. And then it happened. Frame 37, second 14. A flicker in the freezer glass behind me. A reflection, a face, pale, thin-lipped, grinning. But I was alone. The shelf behind me suddenly went from full to empty. No motion, just a flicker. I backed away from the monitor, and I didn't go back to aisle 12 for the rest of that night. I spent the next 3 hours slowly restocking frozen food. It kept me near the exit. I could see everything, no shelves blocking my view. I kept my earbuds out. At 3:03 a.m. I found something else. A note tucked between 2 bags of dog food, where nobody should have been. Folded, cream-colored, no Value Mart branding. Inside, handwritten in sharp black ink, "You're invisible. That's why I like you." Same style, same handwriting as the prank note found last week that Darla blamed on bored teens. But I knew better now. I crumpled it and tossed it in my locker. Then I took my break early and didn't leave the break room until the lights turned purple for morning cleanup. I never said anything else to Darla. I didn't know what to say. Monday came. I told myself Saturday was a bad night. Maybe my brain short-circuited from stress. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe some weird burnout-fueled dream sequence. I'd read about that before. Night shift hallucinations, sleep deprivation illusions. People start hearing whispers or thinking lights flicker. But I wasn't tired. And I hadn't imagined that voice, or that face. Still, I showed up, stocked dry foods, kept near the cameras, pretended aisle 12 didn't exist. At 2:11 a.m. I had to go back. The pallet of disinfectants had been delivered late and Darla asked me to finish the row. I said sure, told myself I'd be fast. I wheeled the cart down the aisle. No one there, until I turned. Brown coat, at the far end, just for a second. He disappeared behind the break room door. I didn't move, I didn't blink. And then, crash. A shelf fell behind me. Cleaning sprays clattered to the floor. I jumped, turned. Nothing broken. Just a single wire shelf collapsed as if nudged by a foot. That was it. I clocked out early. Darla asked if I was okay. I said I wasn't. She looked at me like I was soft. I didn't care. I never went back to Value Mart after that. Darla called twice, left voicemails. I don't get it, Trevor. I thought you liked the quiet. I did. Until the quiet started looking back at me. I applied at a local shipping warehouse the next week. Day shifts only. Loud. Chaotic. I like that now. But sometimes, when I walk through any store, I avoid the cleaning aisles, especially if there's a brown coat on display, or silence that feels too aware. One night, I found something in my hoodie pocket, folded up. Another note. You see me now? That's enough. No idea how it got there. Maybe I imagined it. Or maybe once something knows your name, once it sees you when you thought no one else did, it doesn't forget. I still dream about aisle 12. In those dreams, I'm always stocking the same shelf. Microfiber cloths, always 3. And when I turn around, he's standing there. Not smiling, not threatening, just watching. Like he wants to remind me that I was seen. Because that's what got me, more than the voice or the notes or the reflection. It was the way the man in the coat paid attention to me. Like he knew I didn't matter to anyone else in that store. Like my invisibility made me visible to him. There's something chilling about being noticed. Not by someone who cares, but by something that exists. Only on barriers to haunt the forgotten. That store is still open, as far as I know. I drove past it once, late at night. Lights were on. Aisle 12 still had its signs up. I didn't stop. Some shelves aren't meant to be stocked twice. There's a strange comfort in being invisible, until the wrong thing decides to see you. Sometimes we convince ourselves that being unnoticed keeps us safe, that blending into the background protects us. But being unseen doesn't make you immune. It just makes you a better target for what's lurking in the silence. Don't let the world convince you that your presence doesn't matter, because someone or something might be watching, waiting, to remind you it does, even if it's the last thing you ever wanted. When I first took the early morning shift at Walmart's customer service counter, I sought calm above all else. The late afternoon hours had become too noisy. Kids crying, shoppers in a hurry, debates over expired coupons. But 5 a.m., 8 a.m. on Thursdays offered something different. Sparse aisles, minimal chatter, and returned items done politely and efficiently. It meant I could breathe between customers. Fresh from a divorce and scraping together savings, I needed peace. I lived alone in a rental behind the store's parking lot. My diet was steady, coffee and oatmeal in the morning, and I wore neutral clothes, navy, gray, beige, emotionally cautious. I never looked for conflict. Then he appeared. He came in exactly at 5:07 a.m. one Thursday, quiet, neutral clothes, neatly pressed khakis or trousers, clean-shaven. He didn't speak until I scanned his first return. A pack of socks. I don't remember there being any record of those socks being sold here, but the receipt looked fresh, almost suspiciously neat. I processed it anyway. He leaned in slightly as I handed him the refund. "You have a very steady voice," he said. "It's rare to find someone so gentle with process." I gave a polite nod, mumbling, "Thank you," and tried not to smile. Over the next few Thursdays, he returned something different each time. First a small screwdriver set, then a tea kettle, followed by a can of paint. All of it seemed random. None of the items seemed to match what Walmart typically sold, or what I'd seen on our shelves. The receipts were always perfect, crisp, no sign of wear, and I couldn't pull any matching record in the system if I tried. Still, I processed the transactions and he walked out calmly. By the 4th week, he brought in a full toolkit. "I've been fixing things," he said as I rang it up. There was a pause. "Working. But I'm not sure if it's..." I nodded again, took the kit and avoided eye contact as I refunded him. As he turned to leave, he added quietly over his shoulder, "I moved into your complex last weekend. Saw you at the mailboxes. You wear navy a lot." My heart froze. I'd worn a navy hoodie to get the mail, once. After dark. He knew. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept replaying the shift in my mind, the returns, the receipt anomalies, his closeness, that last sentence about the hoodie. On week 5, I half expected him, but he didn't show up. Part of me was relieved. Another part wondered if it was over. Then things changed. By week 6, my quiet mornings felt fraught. My porch light flickered inconsistently, only when I approached the door. One morning, I discovered a half-eaten granola bar on my dashboard. I never bought it. Another time, my front gate, the automatic latch, was unlatched when I woke. I lived in a small rental behind the parking lot. Nobody else came through that way. Nobody I knew. I told myself it was paranoia. I tried to breathe. Finally, I told my manager. He checked logs, found that there were no scanning entries for the returns, no matching transactions in any card system, no customer profile with his name. The cameras near my counter had malfunctioned frequently in early morning, recording gaps at exactly the time he'd appeared. I blurted it all out. He shrugged. Must be internal error or glitch. Just flag him if he shows again. I tried to absorb that, but I couldn't. Then, one morning before work, there was a shopping bag at my doorstep. Brown paper tied closed. Inside, the toolkit, the socks, the screwdriver set, even the can of paint, and a receipt, lightly printed, but with a handwritten note at the bottom. No refunds, but thank you for always being kind. I staggered back, shaking. I dropped the bag and went back inside without looking again. That was it. I couldn't go back. I texted my manager that same morning and didn't return to work. I packed my things, sublet the apartment, and left that area within a week. Still, at 5:07 a.m. on Thursdays, I wake up, with or without an alarm. I sit in the dark, heart pounding, waiting, listening. I moved into a new apartment several towns over. I switched jobs to something with simple human interaction. Early morning library assistant shifts, book stamps and friendly readers, no returns requiring scrutiny or oversight. Still early hours, but safer. The library cameras worked. The people looked me in the eye and introduced themselves. Still, the memory didn't fade. I pieced together more of the pattern. Receipts that never got scanned. Items that didn't match store inventory. Camera blind spots exactly at 5:07. Him leaning in close to me, recognizing my hoodie color. That final note and returned items on my doorstep, like he'd collected them, reversed the process, and left them. He never said thank you, but he left everything back. I told therapists about waking to 5:07 anxiety, about paranoia at my mailbox late at night. They said, "You trusted that small window of peace too long." Sometimes polite avoidance invites someone to step closer. Years later, I still wake at 5:07. Usually I stay in bed and wait for the moment to pass. Sometimes I pull on a sweater and walk outside, checking the porch, the gate. No one ever appears. I've grown less nervous with time. The library walls feel safe. Coworkers know my name. My mail doesn't get rearranged. But it still unsettles me that someone watched me that closely. That he gave back things I never gave under the pretense of polite returns, and referenced me in ways I barely exposed. That he lived nearby at my building's edge, in silence, and chose my voice to praise. I understand now how small details matter, how soft voices can lure someone in, how being polite can make you stand out to the wrong kind of attention. I learned that even unremarkable people in quiet shifts can become seen. Just enough. Being polite and steady isn't a shield. Sometimes caring, and being seen as kind, can draw attention from people who don't fit into normal systems. Trust the quiet, but honor your instincts. Your presence matters, even if no record exists, and your safety shouldn't depend on process or policy. If someone knows your routines better than you, that's a sign to speak up, even if it feels awkward or reserved. I never thought folding clothes would feel so safe. When I accepted the overnight floor associate job at Thompson Town Outlet in Iowa City, I pictured quiet racks, steady company hours, mindless folding. and peace after dropping out of grad school. I thought the dim lights and silence would help quiet the panic that followed me from my last relationship. I moved back in with my older brother, started work around 10 p.m., and for the first few nights, the routine was comforting. Folding children's jackets, restocking shelves, answering lost customer calls in hushed tones. My manager, Joe, stayed locked in his back office doing paperwork late, and the only other employee on the floor, Alicia, mostly turf-toed between her phone and the break room. By midnight, the store felt like a stage set for one person. Me. I didn't mind. I preferred not talking, eyes down, hands smoothing hangers. It was near 12:45 when I found myself refolding sweaters by the fitting rooms, an area with those flickering lights and weak security coverage never fixed. That's when I heard humming, a woman's voice, off-tune and faint. My chest clenched. No music played at that hour, and Alicia wasn't around. I paused, folded top still in my hand, and leaned toward the narrow fitting room corridor. Hello? I called, trying to keep the tone light, professional. They're closed for cleaning. Silence. No response. I noticed one fitting room door was ajar, just a sliver open. I'd locked them all personally earlier in the night. I checked the hallway. No sign of Alicia. The store registers up front were empty. Joe was silent behind closed doors. I knocked gently. "Ma'am?" No reply. I pushed slowly inside. Graffiti and dust flickered in the low light. The mirror had a dirty fingerprint streak across it, greasy and fresh. My reflection stared back cautiously before I turned quickly around. No woman, no blue dress, no shape in the corner, only my breath and the dull hum of overhead lights. My walkie crackled. I touched the button reflexively, and it crackled again. "She likes you." My blood froze. It wasn't Alicia's voice, it was soft. Female but static-filled, distant. Not the clipped manager tone I knew. "She likes when you fold things." I yanked off the walkie mic and bolted toward the break room, heart rattling. Inside, Alicia stared at her phone as if nothing had happened. I blurted, "You messing with the walkies?" Her eyebrows rose. "What? No. Haven't touched mine in an hour." Her voice was flat, serious, not teasing. I clutched my own walkie, off, batteries dead when I checked. I spent the next hour staying near the checkout tills, avoiding the back. The silence no longer comforted. Instead, it felt like waiting. At 2:14 a.m., Joe messaged me to investigate a noise complaint from the fitting room hallway. A loud thud heard over the security mic shortly after I encountered the door. I didn't want to go, but I did. The hallway was empty except for dust motes drifting in the harsh light. Then I saw it. On the floor in front of the mirror, a dress laid neatly, lace white, old-fashioned like something from a 1960s catalog, definitely not our stock. I knelt, written across the mirror in lip gloss, "Fold this next." I dropped my scanner and ran. Heart pounding. I didn't stop until I was behind the tills. I later told Joe there had been a break-in attempt near the fitting rooms. Security footage confirmed the hallway was a dead zone that night. No video, no mic pickup. He nodded and told me not to worry, but when I looked at him, I saw his jaw tense and eyes distant, as if he knew something unsaid. I gave 2 weeks' notice the next morning. I couldn't stay. I left that shift, never switching on the walkie again. Later that day, I got one last message through my powered-off device. "She liked how quiet you were." I moved in with my brother after quitting. I found a day job at a local cafe, shoulder to shoulder with laughter and the clink of dishes. No silent corridors, no whispering voices. But nights after the shift, sometimes I'd wake in darkness hearing a murmur, a hum so faint it could have been my own breath echoing in the quiet. I replayed what happened in my head. The fingerprint, the walkie voice, the lace dress on the floor, the mirroring message, maybe cosmetic prank gone wrong, but none of it fit any prank I'd ever known. Nobody tampered with fitting rooms, and nobody had left that glove-fitted note in lip gloss except someone who watched, and aware. Despite evidence or lack thereof, I found myself drawn back there. I drove past the store once at 1 a.m., windows dark. I didn't go in. I couldn't face flickering lights or that dress. Some nights I thought, maybe I overreacted. Maybe it was sleep deprivation, but my nerves never settled. My brother said I looked haunted. I told him I was just tired. He nodded, but I saw the fear in his eyes when I recounted the walkie voice and the pranks. Still, I kept that walkie powered off, left it in a drawer. Yet, 2 weeks later, I found another note folded in my coat pocket. No branding, no postcard design, just cream cardstock, sharp script. She saw you fold today. I stared at it, breath caught. I hadn't worn that coat in a week. No delivery, no mail, no one had visited. My hands shook yet again. I realized this wasn't random, it was deliberate. So I changed the locks on my bedroom door. I stopped wearing skinny coats to work. I double-checked fitting room doors manually. I told my cafe manager about anxiety. I still needed help building things up, not crashing under dread. Therapy sessions started again. Less nights alone. At home, I tossed the notes in the trash, but each time I walked past the bin, I paused, curious if the next one would appear, knowing that once something notices you, it doesn't just vanish. Over the next few months, I was fine, until I wasn't. Anxiety returned stronger than before, not about the stalker or the store, but about being quiet, being invisible. I found myself scrolling social media late at night, trying to see what loops I'd slipped into. I'd wake sweating, haunted by the lip-glossed message, "Fold this next." One weekend evening, I drove by Thompson Town Outlet again. Automatic doors glowed inside, dawn shift already stocking racks. I slowed down near the entrance and saw someone inside. No shape, not even motion, just the racks, the same flickering lights in the fitting area. My throat constricted. I sped away, heart pounding. I called Alicia once, left a message. "You never saw anything?" She texted back hours later. "I don't know what happened. I heard things on the walkies after you left. I never turned mine on." I didn't call again. Some nights I dream. I'm folding sweaters in aisle 5, leaning into the racks. Mirror light flickers. Fitting room door creaks open. The lace dress appears. A whisper. "You're quiet." I wake before I can move. I realized I'd internalized the eerie lesson. It wasn't the store or the dress that got me, it was the silence, which was never silent. And the woman, whoever she was, liked that I kept quiet. Months passed. Life drifted back to normal. I got a promotion at the cafe, moved into my own place, started taking evening classes. I never intended to return to midnight shifts. Then one afternoon, I got a small envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a Polaroid, fitting room door in the background. In the foreground, my hands folding a sweater. I recognized the sleeve of a uniform I no longer owned. The image was grainy, timestamp stamped Mar 08-22-01-10 a.m. Exactly the night I heard the off-tune humming. My blood froze. My fingers shook. I didn't want to know who sent it. I shredded it immediately. Still, I couldn't sleep that night. The past caught me again. I thought of that woman, humming softly in a dead zone of camera coverage, leaving a dress for me to fold. It wasn't a ghost story. It was something else. Something real enough to leave evidence. Private enough to stay unseen by everyone else. I told a therapist about the photo, about being seen when I thought I'd hidden myself. She said, "Invisible people usually stay quiet about being hurt or overlooked. You got noticed, and not in a good way." I nodded. It felt right. Now, years later, I tell this story in part because I believe being unseen in a world that demands noise can feel safe. But sometimes it's dangerous. I'm no longer that quiet kid folding clothes in a dark store, waiting for something that came through silence. I talk in therapy. I talk to friends. I'm loud sometimes. But I still hear humming. Not nightly, but in quiet moments. A draft of memory. And I still avoid fitting rooms in dead zones. I see dresses in thrift racks and feel a shiver like someone once left it for me. The physical things are gone, but the lesson remains. Being invisible may feel safe, but silence can attract the wrong attention. Sometimes when we disappear into the background to protect ourselves, it's not protection, it's invitation. Speak up, move through shadows. Let someone else notice you first. Because being seen is not always harmless, but not always haunting. Sometimes it's what saves you. Long before the elevators at Vanguard Heights started moving on their own, I was already used to things that didn't make sense. I was 31 when I started working nights at that glass and steel tower on Lakeshore Drive. Vanguard Heights was the kind of place where rich people rented places to store their dogs. Penthouse floors, rooftop pools, marble everything. And they paid me to make sure nobody disturbed the peace after dark. Honestly, that suited me fine. My name's Marcus Lyle. I used to be a Marine. 2 tours overseas. Came back a different person, as they say. Loud noises made me twitch, and crowds made my stomach turn. My ex-wife tried to be patient at first, but you can't ask someone to love a ghost. I lost her and my daughter in the same year. That's when I started picking up overnight security jobs. Nights were quieter. No conversations I didn't want to have. No eyes to judge me. Just me and the silence. If you're broken enough, silence feels like a gift. The Vanguard's night shift ran from 11:30 p.m. to 7 in the morning. My job was simple. Hourly rounds through all floors, check the server room, manually upload backup CCTV footage from the floor ports, and monitor the elevators. There were 25 floors in total. The penthouse on the 25th was still under construction when I started. Nobody lived there. Just a bunch of tarp and scaffolding left behind when funding dried up. It was on my 3rd night, right around 12:46 a.m., when things started to go off script. I had just finished my walkthrough on the 24th and was about to take the stairs down. Never trusted elevators unless I had to. But as I passed by, I heard the chime. A soft ding. The elevator doors opened without me pressing anything, and when I glanced inside, the floor indicator wasn't blank like usual. It said 26. I stood there, blinking at the number. There was no 26th floor. I stepped back, staring at the display like it might fix itself. I even opened my notes app and checked my own log from earlier that week. Vanguard Heights was built in 2009, 25 floors total, with the penthouse being the top level. The elevator stayed open for a beat longer than usual, then shut quietly. The screen above it still read, "Going up." And sure enough, on the monitor back in the lobby, I watched it climb. 25. Then 26. And then it stopped. I remember holding my breath. I didn't tell anyone the next morning. I wasn't sure what to say. How do you bring up something like that? It's one thing to think you're cracking under pressure, another to confirm it out loud. I convinced myself it was a glitch. One of those elevator errors. I even Googled it. Phantom floors, I read. Programming bugs. Harmless stuff. I figured I'd let it go. Maybe it was just the building messing with me the same way my mind sometimes did. But a week later, same time, same elevator, it happened again. Only this time it came back down. And when the doors opened in the lobby, it was empty. Except for one thing. A set of small, wet footprints. Like a child's. Leading out of the elevator and vanishing halfway across the marble floor. I didn't report it. Hell, I didn't even mop it up. I just sat at the monitor desk for the next 5 hours, staring at that elevator, waiting for something, or someone, to come back. But nothing ever did. I started to dread 12:46. I'd stare at the clock every night, like I was waiting for a bomb to go off. Some nights the elevator stayed still. Some nights I heard that soft ding. The strange part was it only ever happened when I was alone. No residents, no cleaners, no witnesses. I tried to forget it. I really did. But then the tapes started changing. See, every night I'd walk each floor, then plug a handheld drive into the server ports on each one to back up footage. It was analog tech, more secure that way. Less chance of hacking, they said. I was reviewing footage from the 25th floor, the supposedly empty one, and I saw something impossible. It was me. I was standing outside the elevator, pressing the button. The problem was, I hadn't. I never used that elevator during my rounds, always the stairs. And in that footage, I looked different, not physically, but off. My posture was stiff. I wasn't blinking, just standing there, waiting. Then I saw the elevator arrive. Doors slid open, my figure stepped in, and then the screen glitched out, full static. When the feed returned, I was gone. I tried rewinding it 3 times. The same thing happened every time. I brought it up with Maria, my supervisor. She gave me the look people always do when you're a vet talking about strange things, like they're not sure whether to listen or call someone. "You're probably exhausted, Marcus," she said. "Get some rest. I can cover your next shift if you need sleep." I nodded, but I didn't take her up on it. Sleep didn't help anymore. Nightmares don't care how tired you are. I kept the footage, made a copy on my own drive, even uploaded it to a private folder online. Something about it felt wrong, like I needed proof in case I didn't make it through the week. Then came the footprints. They started showing up more often, sometimes fresh, sometimes smudged. Once I found a single handprint pressed against the inside of the elevator glass. Tiny, like a child's. One night I left my phone inside the elevator and pressed 24, just to see what would happen. The doors closed, and when I opened the panel to hit the emergency stop, the buttons had changed. There was no 24, only 26. That's when I knew I had to go up. Not just out of curiosity, but because whatever this was, it wasn't stopping. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't living. I was just existing between elevator chimes. So I made the decision. One last shift. I was going to press the button. That night I showed up at 10:45, brought a thermos of black coffee, a flashlight, my old marine knife. Dumb, I know. But muscle memory dies hard. At 12:45 I stood in front of the elevator and waited. It came on cue. Ding. The doors opened. Inside, the panel was lit. 26 gleamed like it had always been there. I stepped inside and pressed it. There was no jolt, no shudder, just a smooth, slow ascent. I didn't breathe, I didn't blink. The number changed. 24, 25, then 26. The doors slid open. What I saw didn't belong in this building. The hallway was narrow, lit by orange fluorescence that flickered overhead. The walls were exposed brick, unfinished and filthy. Wires hung from the ceiling like veins. The air was thick with dust. My boots left prints in it. There were no apartment doors, just wide, empty archways that led into pitch black. And then I heard it, a little girl's voice, singing, soft, off-key, ring around the rosy pocket full of... The sound was close, but I couldn't tell from where. Then came the dragging sound. Slow, wet, heavy. I turned and hit the elevator button. Nothing happened. When I spun around again, the elevator was gone. Just a gaping black shaft. Panic settled in fast. I pulled my flashlight from my belt and swept it side to side. Dust floated through the beam like snow. I called out, "Is someone there?" No answer. Then, whispering. Not a voice. Multiple. Some low, some high, all out of sync. I couldn't tell what they were saying. My feet moved without me telling them to, slow steps deeper into the corridor. The further I walked, the colder it got. Eventually, I found a janitor's closet, or what looked like one. I stepped inside and found a full-length mirror leaning against the wall. When I looked into it, I wasn't there. Instead, behind me stood a tall man in a black coat, pale face, thin smile. I turned around instantly. Nothing. But I swear, I felt breath on my neck. That was enough. I ran. My boots slammed against the concrete. I didn't care where I went, I just needed to find the elevator again. I don't know how long I ran. Time felt broken up there, but eventually, I turned a corner, and the elevator was waiting. Doors open. I didn't stop to question it. I dove in and slammed the L button. As it descended, I caught a glimpse of myself in the panel's reflection, and behind me, the man in the coat, smiling. I quit the next morning, left a note, didn't say goodbye to anyone. 3 months passed. I tried to rebuild what I could, started therapy again, stopped drinking, took a day shift at a warehouse, tried to forget it, but I still dream of the orange lights. One cold February afternoon, I walked past Vanguard Heights. There was a new banner on the scaffolding. Now leasing floor 26, the exclusive Sky Lounge experience. I walked into the leasing office, asked casually about the top floor. "Oh, we don't have a 26th floor, sir," the woman smiled. "Penthouse is the top." I pointed at the banner. Her smile didn't even flicker. "That's just a marketing term, for the views." I asked to see the floor plan. She pulled one from a drawer. 25 floors. I left, but I never got an answer. Just like I never got my reflection back from that mirror. I don't take elevators anymore, and I don't work nights. Some places weren't built for people like me. Some floors weren't built for anyone. Don't ignore the signs your mind or the world gives you. Whether it's trauma, instinct, or a door that shouldn't exist, some boundaries aren't meant to be crossed. Some places remember you, even if you try to forget them. There's a kind of silence in empty office buildings that doesn't feel peaceful. It feels forgotten. Like you're walking through something that used to be alive, but isn't anymore. That's what the Delta Crown Tower felt like. 40 stories of glass, steel, and numbers, sitting dark in downtown Seattle after hours. At night it hummed low, like a machine that wasn't entirely shut off. I was one of the few people still walking its halls while the rest of the city slept. My name is Carla Dean. I was 28 when this happened. A janitor, single mom, and desperate. I didn't grow up thinking I'd spend nights wiping the fingerprints of people who wouldn't even nod at me in daylight. But when your son's life depends on medication insurance barely touches, you stop caring about pride. Mason, my boy, had a congenital heart defect. Treatments weren't just expensive, they were constant. Doctors, pills, monitors. It never ended. And when my husband bailed 6 months into the pandemic saying he couldn't take the pressure, I didn't have the luxury of a breakdown. So I took triple shifts. Delta Crown was my overnight job. I worked floors 12 through 16. Most nights I was alone except for a bored security guy on the first floor who rarely looked up from his tablet. I preferred it that way. But the 15th floor, something was wrong there from the start. It had been under renovation. Old finance offices gutted and sealed off. My manager told me to skip it entirely. "Nobody goes up there, Carla. Don't waste your time." He said it like it was an inconvenience, like warning me about wet paint. But every night at 1 a.m. I'd hear it. A soft knock from inside the fire escape door on 15. Always the same rhythm. Not loud, but deliberate. At first I thought maybe it was pipes or temperature shifts messing with metal. Buildings talk like that when they're old. But this wasn't a random creak. It was more like someone trying to be let in. I told myself not to overthink it. I had enough stress to carry. But my brain's never been great at letting things go once it gets its claws in. The 4th night I saw her. I was vacuuming the corridor on 16, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. A woman walking past the break room windows. Pale skin, blondish hair in a bun, navy skirt, shoulder pads, like she stepped out of a 90s HR video. She turned, glanced at me, then disappeared around the corner near the old accounting wing. I followed her. There was no reason to. Just instinct. Maybe she dropped a key card. Maybe she was a night intern. But when I turned the corner, nothing. The hallway was empty. No footsteps, no movement. Just that same dry, dusty floor that hadn't been cleaned since renovation started. I checked the emergency exit. Still chained shut. The bar still rusted. I reported it to my supervisor the next morning. Benny barely looked up from his tablet. You probably imagined it. Nobody's authorized up there after 10 p.m. Maybe you're just tired. Tired? Sure. I'd been tired since 2017, but I wasn't crazy. I knew what I saw, and something told me I hadn't seen the last of her. I started watching the clocks more closely. 1 a.m. came like clockwork. So did the knock. Not every night, but enough to keep me guessing. When I did hear it, I'd pause my mopping and just stand there, listening. The knocks would stop the second I moved toward the door. That's when the air changed. Colder, like a freezer door cracked open behind me. A week after the first sighting, I saw her again. She was standing at the far end of the 16th floor hallway. Same outfit, same expression, just still. Her hands were clasped together like she was waiting in line for something. I blinked. She was gone. I wasn't scared, not yet. I think part of me was just too exhausted to feel fear the way most people do. It was more of a dull, growing discomfort, like I'd stepped into someone else's memory. But that's when I started digging. The building had old workstations scattered throughout. Some terminals were still logged in from day staff. I used one on the 14th floor, figured I'd search the employee database, just to see if she showed up. All I had was a blurry memory. Pale, blonde, looked maybe mid-20s. I remembered 3 letters from the badge, RA, or maybe RD. I searched for an hour, nothing matched. Then I found an archive directory. Buried under former personnel files, I found her. Laura Girard, junior auditor, died 2004. I clicked the entry. 1 line. Fatal fall, fire escape shaft. On site. There was no follow-up report, no memorial, no HR notes, just gone. I kept digging. News articles, forums. I found a mention in a city record. Wrongful death claim filed by a father, settled privately. No details. But there it was. Her story had been erased from the building. But the building hadn't forgotten her. The 15th floor was where she fell. The fire escape door was where it happened. And suddenly everything made a different kind of sense. I brought a recorder the next night. A cheap voice memo device I used to use when studying. I clipped it to my belt and turned it on right before 1 a.m. The knock came, right on schedule. I approached the fire escape door slowly, mop in one hand, heart doing strange things in my chest. Once, twice. Silence. I know your name, I said softly. That was when the handle clicked. The door opened. Inside was a staircase, narrow and steep, wrapped in metal railings. The lights overhead flickered, barely functional. I stepped inside. The cold hit me like a slap. It wasn't just chill. It was wrong, like it didn't belong in the world I came from. The door slammed shut behind me. I screamed. The sound bounced off the walls and came back louder. My phone flashlight was shaking in my hands, then she appeared 4 steps above me. Lara. No blood, no wounds. But the way she stood, stiff, off balance, made something in my brain scream to run. Why won't they let me clock out? She whispered. I couldn't answer. I couldn't think. I turned and bolted down the stairs. My boots hit metal, then concrete, then linoleum. I pushed open the next emergency door, floor 14. I collapsed in the hallway, sobbing. Behind me, I heard it. Nails, scraping along cement, then silence. They found me an hour later in the lobby. Security said I must have tripped and hit my head. There were scratches down both arms, some bleeding. They called an ambulance, but I refused it. I didn't want to answer questions I knew no one would believe. Benny met me outside. What the hell happened? He asked. You have a ghost on the 15th floor, I said. I smiled when I said it. It felt stupid. but I wasn't kidding. He didn't laugh. "You've been working a lot of hours. Maybe take a few nights off." I didn't go back. The voice recorder was gone. I had it when I went in. It wasn't there when I left. 2 months later, I saw the building in the news. New ownership. Same structure. New name. Gerard Plaza. There was no explanation in the article. Just a mention of rebranding efforts. I don't know if they know why they chose the name. Maybe someone in legal saw it in a settlement file. Or maybe Lara got tired of being forgotten. Maybe this was her way of punching back through the walls. I still work nights. Different place now. Grocery store in Linwood. Quiet fluorescent lights. No more elevators. It pays less, but I sleep better. Mason's doing okay. He's 7 now. Loves dinosaurs. Thinks ketchup is a vegetable. He doesn't remember the months I spent in silence. But I do. Some nights, when I close up, I'll glance at the back doors and wonder what I'd do if I heard a knock. I don't know if I'd open it, but I'd probably listen. That's what Lara wanted, I think. To be seen. To be counted. All she asked was to clock out. But in places like Delta Crown, people become numbers. And sometimes numbers get lost. Systems fail, terminals crash, files corrupt. But ghosts, they remember, and they wait. No system is perfect. When institutions forget they're dead, they create holes in reality that can't be patched with money or silence. Everyone deserves to be seen and to go home. I didn't come to Oregon for peace, I came to disappear. By the time I stepped off that Greyhound in Portland, I'd changed my name, burned every bridge back home, and carried only what I could fit in a duffel. I was 26 and already on my 3rd life. The kind of guy who packed quietly, left at night, and didn't tell anyone. Not because I was running from the law, but from someone who was above it. Silverline Distribution hired me, no questions asked. Graveyard shift. Inventory coordinator. The title sounded better than it was, and really, I checked boxes, signed manifests, and moved pallets. But it was steady. And the night shift? That was perfect. Fewer eyes, fewer questions, no past. Our crew was small. 6 of us spread across a warehouse the size of a football field. It always smelled like rubber, coffee, and dust. You got used to it. The lights buzzed overhead and flickered whenever the system rebooted. That happened more than it should have. Bay 12 was the far end of the facility. Older, barely used, full of rusting shelving and equipment nobody wanted to touch. Overflow storage, they called it. I liked working near it. No cameras, no radios. Just me, the pallets, and the hum of the building settling. Some of the guys told stories about that bay. Accidents, weird sightings, missing time. I figured they were just screwing with the new guy. I didn't care. I'd lived through worse than ghost stories. Until April 3rd, 2:17 in the morning. I was doing rounds, clipboard in hand, when I passed by Bay 12. The lights above it flickered like they always did. I glanced through the mesh security gate. A man stood there, tall, stocky, reflective vest hanging crooked, torn and dirty. He was turned away, staring down the aisle like he was checking stock. "Hey," I called. "You lost?" No answer, no movement. I blinked. He was gone. I walked over, opened the gate, stepped inside. Nothing. Just dust and crates. I figured maybe it was a trick of the light. My eyes played games when I was tired. Still, I couldn't shake it. The next morning, I used Kenny's login to check the security footage. Kenny didn't care. He'd been there 6 years and stopped giving a damn 5 years ago. Bay 12's feed? Black from 2:16 to 2:20 a.m. No error code, just static. And that was just the beginning. The man kept showing up. Every night after that, always at 2:17 a.m., always in Bay 12. Sometimes standing, sometimes crouched. Never facing me. Never moving. I stopped checking the footage. There was no point. Same glitch, same blackout. 4 minutes wiped clean like they never existed. I told Kenny on a smoke break. He lit a cigarette with shaking hands. That was the first time I saw him rattled. "You said reflective vest, right? Torn, dirt on the boots?" "Yeah," I said. "Tall guy, didn't see his face. You know him?" Kenny exhaled slowly. "White Stone Corp." "Tommy Beck, used to be floor manager. Back when we were still under..." "What happened?" "Forklift accident in under 9, Bay 12, during a grave shift reorg. Everyone swore he was walking between lanes, but the cameras glitched and the logs got corrupted. Forklift backed in, no one saw him, crushed instantly, no recovery, nothing left but a shoe and half a badge." "You serious?" "Insurance settled fast. His family comes by sometimes, leaves flowers in the alley behind the unit." "So, you think that's who I saw?" Kenny didn't answer. He just looked at the ground. "You ever seen him?" "I don't go near Bay 12 after 2 a.m., he muttered. I laughed, sort of, but it didn't feel funny. I decided to go in. Part of me was curious, part of me was stupid, but mostly I just wanted to know if I was losing my mind. Trauma does weird things to the brain. I'd seen people where there were none before, so I came prepared. Flashlight, phone camera, voice recorder app running. I entered Bay 12 just before 2:17 a.m. The air felt heavier, like I'd stepped into a sealed room. Lights flickered once, then shut off. Total black. I froze. Then I heard it, dragging. Not steps, not even walking, like something heavy, maybe metal, being pulled across the floor. Then, breathing, ragged, uneven, right behind me. I spun around, flashlight on. Nothing. My phone screen flickered. The recording had stopped. The screen turned green, then red, then black, a loud pop. Then the lights blinked back on, one by one, and there he was, at the end of the aisle, facing me. The vest was soaked through. His ID badge swung gently from his chest. Tommy Beck, shift supervisor. Night. Half his skull was caved in, one eye missing. The other stared straight through me. Then he opened his mouth. "Finish my shift." I ran. I don't remember how I got out of Bay 12. I remember pushing the gate open, slamming through the hallway, and hitting the cold cement of Bay 11. My chest hurt. My legs weren't working right. I screamed for help. The others found me crouched behind a compressor, shaking. "What the hell happened?" Kenny asked. I couldn't speak. He looked at me for a long time, then he whispered, "He talked to you, didn't he?" That was it for me. I sent my resignation 2 days later. No explanation. No return address. The warehouse didn't reach out. They never do. But 3 weeks later, I saw a photo on someone's social media. Silverline had mounted a small memorial plaque in the break room for Tommy Beck. No ceremony, no flowers. Just a black and white photo under glass with words burned into a brass plate. Shift never ended. Rest now. I work at a diner now. Day shifts. Nothing heavy. Nothing dark. I don't talk about what happened. Not to my coworkers. Not to my new landlord. Not even to myself most days. But sometimes around 2:17 a.m., when I wake up to use the bathroom or the wind hits the window just right, I remember the dragging sound. I remember the eyes. And I wonder how many other warehouses have ghosts no one talks about. Men who worked themselves to death, disappeared into shift schedules, and were replaced by the next body in line. We don't talk about the ones who were never clocked out. We just finish their shifts. Because the work has to keep moving. The system demands it. Even if the system forgets them, they don't forget us. When labor becomes invisible, so do the people behind it. Some jobs take everything from you, even your name, your rest, your death. Always remember, not every worker who disappears was truly lost. Some were simply overwritten. I never imagined I'd be back at Whisperhaven, sweeping its floors under fluorescent lights I'd once hated. My name's Elliot Granger, and I used to be a veterinary technician, bright-eyed, full of purpose. That changed in 2004, when I made a sedation mistake. A dog didn't wake up. I resigned quietly. Wrong word pouring in my mind. Remorse imprinted in every cell. Over time, alcohol and prescription drugs filled the silence I left behind. Recovery was slow. I lost my veterinary license, lost my marriage, but I kept surviving. By 2010, I was broke, divorced, and floundering. One winter evening, I answered a voicemail from Whisper Haven offering janitorial night shifts. It was the only steady work I could get. At first I refused. Pride, shame, all that nonsense. But then I moved in with my sister and recognized my desperation. I walked back through the shelter doors I'd once used as a tech, safe in my illusions. I didn't belong here anymore. Now I was just the guy cleaning kennels. The building falls into emptiness by 11 p.m. I mop suites, empty trash bins, refill medical cabinets. It keeps me busy and sober. But the hardest part of the job is the freezer room. Tucked past the medical wing, it stores remains of euthanized animals, bagged and tagged. The door groans on opening. Cold air sighs into the hallway. I avoid it when I can. That Sunday night in October, I'd been working since 10. The cats in cages stirred when I passed, sometimes making me pause. They felt haunted, I thought. Or maybe I was seeing ghosts. I wrung out my mop in the hall and heard a knock, loud on the front glass. I looked up. It was 2:47 a.m. I wasn't expecting anyone. A woman stood outside, hoodie drawn tight, face pale under the vestibule light. She looked exhausted, tears glistening. Beneath her messenger bag, she pressed her hand against the glass. "Please," she whispered. "I need him back." Over the past months, I learned not to open after hours. But something about her eyes, so raw, made me hesitate. I unlocked the vestibule and cracked the door. "Ma'am," I said gently, "I'm sorry. Post hours. You can't be here." "She's telling me he's still here," she said, voice trembling. "Noon, but I changed my mind. I need to hold him." They said he was euthanized, and I inhaled sharply. That guilt memory, my own, hit like a shockwave. Families doing this all the time. Regret flooding back. Against policy, against my better judgment. I stepped aside and unlocked the corridor to the freezer. Her lips trembled. "He's not garbage. I shouldn't have signed." I nodded, silent. Every fiber of my body screamed to stop, but I opened the freezer door. Inside, freezing air and stacked black bags. I found the tag. Butter, 10-year-old short hair. Euthanized today. I dragged the bag onto the prep table and unzipped halfway. The woman's gaze hardened. I asked softly, "Would you like a moment?" She nodded. I stepped outside and closed the door. 5 minutes passed. 10. Then I knocked. The table was empty. The bag zipped back up. No woman. No sign. The door alarm hadn't sounded. No footprints in dust. She vanished. I checked the vestibule, the washroom, the hall. No sign she'd left. The big glass door still reflected empty neon. My hands shook. I went back into the freezer room. Now the bag tag had changed. It read a different name, wrong. And the zipper was half open, as if someone else had handled it. The cold felt personal. A violation. I gulped air I didn't need. The fluorescent light overhead buzzed. The cats in cages screamed in my mind. I backed out and locked the door, then called my supervisor, voice tight. They said the cameras were offline due to maintenance. They'd review footage next day. HR gave me time off if I needed it. I said yes without thinking. Left quietly. I drove aimless, hail-covered desert roads at 3 a.m. Nothing else made sense. That night I slept maybe an hour. Dreamed of cats in mashed boots, voices whispers from empty halls. Next morning I found the freezer cage shifted. I removed Butter's bag and quietly repacked it correctly. Something in me couldn't leave it wrong. No one else would know. No one else saw. I stayed away for a few days. Ate ramen, stared at silence, called my sponsor, talked until I cried. Every time I remembered that knock at 2:47 a.m., I thought I saw that woman's face in my dreams. Then I went back. The building smelled like bleach and guilt. Everything looked the same. Except me. I avoided the freezer. I didn't want to touch that door again. I dipped a rag and wiped walls with shaking fingers. I began noticing weird things. Bin lids flopped open. Lights clicked on when nothing moved. A meow when all animals slept. My vision jittered at the doorway to the freezer, but I forced myself to walk past. I snapped at coworkers when they joked. I kept my mouth shut to ghost stories, but my heart thudded with something real. One night, a new volunteer, teenager, asked questions about ours. He lingered near the freezer door. I smiled stiffly. He backed away. Another time I was cleaning near the kennel next to medical wing and saw tracks in the dust. Footprints leading away from the freezer, no entrance logs. I angsted the security sheets. No record. Each time I reopened that door, guilt closed tighter around me. A month later, I just walked out during shift without notice. No apology, no letter, nothing. I drove off without turning back. That night, I packed a duffel in my junker sedan and left Flagstaff at dawn. Months later, I heard Whisper Haven updated cameras and upgraded freezer alarms. I read the HR newsletter. They issued after-hours protocols. I felt relief but also regret. I never told them what happened. I still dream of her voice. He's not garbage, I want him back. And when I listen, I hear my own guilt echoed back. I rebuilt with what I had. Went to counseling. Found a support group. Did janitorial jobs during the day. Volunteer shifts at animal rescues. But never near euthanasia. I still haunt the sound of a freezer door groaning. I still wake at 2:47 a.m. I never confirmed if she was real. Maybe hallucination. Maybe memory fractured by guilt and sleepless nights. Doesn't matter. She felt real enough. Touched guilt enough to twist tags, shift bags. Every day I live with that story inside, trying to be better than I was. Trying to help animals so I don't feel complicit. Trying to hold space for things I once harmed. Sometimes the hardest guilt isn't about what you did. It's about how you lived afterward. Our past mistakes don't define us, but refusing to face them locks us in. Compassion for others, and forgiveness for yourself, breaks open the coldest rooms. Long before I ever stepped foot in room 509, I believed hospitals weren't as scary as people said they were. It's not that I didn't understand why others felt that way. Most people only see a hospital when they're hurting, or worse, saying goodbye. But for me, it was routine. Clean white floors, latex gloves, caffeine at 2 a.m., and that faint metallic scent of antiseptic that somehow stays in your clothes. I was 29 when I transferred to St. Ridge Memorial, taking night shifts in the cardiology ward. 2 months into the job, fresh off a messy divorce and still nursing grief from losing my younger brother to a heart condition. Grief and exhaustion have a way of thinning your skin. You stop noticing it's happening, and by the time you do, it's already gotten inside you. St. Ridge was an older hospital, tucked in a forgotten corner of Baltimore. Red brick walls outside, fluorescent lights buzzing softly inside. Nothing unusual. The cardiology wing where I was assigned was a straight stretch of hallway with 12 rooms. Room 509 was at the end, tucked around a slight bend near the service elevator. That room was quiet, always a bit colder than the rest. On my first night, the nurse finishing her shift gave me a sideways glance when I asked if it was occupied. "Mr. Lane," she said, 71, mild cardiac arrest. Wife's a bit intense. She didn't explain further. When I met Herman Lane, he was sleeping, gray stubble on his cheeks, oxygen hissing beside him. His vitals were stable. Sitting by his bedside was his wife, Violet. She stood when I entered, as if ready to greet someone far more important than a night nurse. Her cardigan was beige, pressed neatly. Her hair was curled into tight, dated waves. She smiled, but it was her eyes that made me stop short, wide, watching, calculating. "Thank you for looking after him," she said. "He gets scared when I'm not nearby." She stayed all night sitting motionless. Didn't read, didn't nap, just watched him. In the weeks that followed, I only saw her once or twice, always the same outfit, same hollow smile. I wrote it off as old-fashioned devotion, like some people in my grandparents' church, but something about her felt staged, like she was performing for someone else in the room. Still, there were more pressing matters: codes, medications, IVs, families crying in quiet corners. It wasn't until a Tuesday night in January that I felt something shift. It was 1:10 a.m. I remember because the hallway clock had just ticked past the hour and the ward was unusually still. I was making rounds. I passed by room 509 and immediately noticed the change. The chair beside the bed was empty. No Violet. I checked the monitor. Mr. Lane was asleep. Oxygen steady. For the first time, the room seemed peaceful. I felt myself exhale. And then I heard it. "You changed your hair." I turned so fast my badge lanyard snapped against my chest. Violet was standing in the bathroom doorway. Only, the door had been open moments ago. I was sure of it. "Oh, yeah," I said, feeling my stomach tighten. "Change. Chopped a few inches off. Just needed a..." She smiled. "He likes women with shorter hair. That's what I had when we met." Then she stepped back into the shadows. I walked away quickly. Later that night, I mentioned the odd encounter to Alicia, the other overnight nurse. She frowned and looked at me like I'd said something troubling. "Miranda. Violet's not allowed on the floor anymore. Doctor had her banned last week." I blinked. "What?" "She was just in the room." "No, she's not supposed to be anywhere near the hospital." We both sat in silence. I didn't know what to say, and I wasn't sure I wanted to know more. It wasn't the first time I'd seen someone after they shouldn't have been there. Hospitals are strange places, full of ghosts, both the metaphorical and sometimes, not to sound unprofessional, ones that feel a little too real. But I've never been a ghost story kind of person. I believe in blood pressure and medication, not cold spots and flickering lights. Still, something about room 509 was off. At 2:15 a.m., I went back to check Herman's vitals again. I hesitated outside the room, half expecting Violet to be sitting in that chair again. But when I stepped in, the room was silent. Just Mr. Lane, still asleep. I glanced at the tray table. There was a napkin on it. Not one from the hospital. The fabric looked too soft, too floral, folded in half. Curiosity 1. Inside was handwriting. Delicate, loopy cursive. "Thank you for not judging me. He needs someone who stays." My breath caught. I flipped it over. A simple drawing. A daisy, unevenly sketched. Just like the ones my brother used to draw when he was afraid. Before his heart surgeries, he'd leave one on my pillow. Always the same daisy. Always a note. "You stay, right?" I sank into the chair in the hallway and just stared at the paper. None of this made sense. I tucked the napkin into my scrub pocket and finished my shift in a haze. That morning, I walked past room 509 one last time before clocking out. The door was closed. It stayed closed the next night. The nurse on call told me Herman had coded at 4:12 a.m. They tried, but there was nothing to be done. Room 509 was empty now. Lights off. Silent. But the elevator outside kept opening, then closing. No one around. It dinged every 5 minutes. When we called maintenance, they said there was nothing wrong with the system. I didn't ask about Violet. I didn't want to know. I didn't sleep after that shift. I sat in my apartment, the napkin unfolded on the kitchen table, coffee gone cold beside it. The writing wasn't just familiar in its tone. It was in his style. My brother had a very specific way of forming his E's, like tiny loops barely closed at the top. I told myself it was coincidence. People repeat habits. People mimic each other. But it itched at something deep in my chest that I couldn't scratch away. The next few nights, room 509 stayed empty. I requested to avoid it during my rounds, but the charge nurse laughed like I was joking. "It's an empty room," she said. "What, you scared of an empty bed?" I gave a half-hearted smile and walked away. On Friday, we got a new patient in 509. I overheard the assignment during huddle. "Mr. Patel, post-bypass, 74, alert, stable, had a daughter who stayed through the evening. I walked past the room at 1 a.m. The lights were dim. Mr. Patel was asleep. The daughter had gone home. Nothing unusual until I caught a shape in the reflection of the window. A woman, beige cardigan, just brushing past the corner of the bed. I spun around. No one there. I stood in the doorway, staring into the shadows. "Is someone there?" I whispered, before I even realized what I was saying. Silence. Then the faintest rustle, like fabric brushing over plastic. My throat dried out. My fingers hovered over my radio, debating if I should call for someone else. But what would I even say? "Can someone check the room with me because I think I saw a ghost?" It sounded ridiculous even in my head. I stepped inside. The room was colder than the others. I checked the vents. Nothing was blowing. The thermostat read 71. I double-checked Mr. Patel's vitals and quickly left. At the nurse's station, I tried to shake it off. I told myself it was the reflection, the fatigue, maybe the stress finally boiling over. But just before dawn, when I went to grab supplies from the storage closet down the hall, I heard something again. A whisper, faint. "I stay because they forget." I froze, my back pressed against the wall. I waited. Nothing. No footsteps. No movement. Just the soft humming of machines and distant hallway lights flickering. When I stepped into the supply room, one of the gowns had fallen off its hook. Beneath it, another napkin, folded the same way, same cursive. They always forget. That's when they leave. I didn't tell anyone this time. I kept it in my locker, beneath my lunch. When I got home that morning, I dug through the box in my closet, the one labeled Nate stuff. Inside were old drawings, school papers, and one of his final notes from the hospital before his last surgery. A daisy, same lines, same curves. I had buried him 5 years ago. So how was his handwriting in a room he'd never been near? The next week, the elevator broke. Or at least that's what they told us. Engineers came up twice. I overheard one of them mutter, "Nothing wrong with the wiring. Doors just keep opening on their own." He joked it was a ghost. We all laughed, but the kind of laugh that ends in silence too quickly. Room 509 had been empty again for 2 nights after Mr. Patel got discharged. I hadn't stepped foot inside, but on Tuesday night the call light went off. Room 509. That was impossible. No one had been assigned there. I double-checked the board. Still empty. I radioed the desk. "Is anyone supposed to be in 509? Static. Then a response. "Not that I know of. Could be a glitch." The light stayed on. Steady. Red. I decided to check it myself. Half out of duty, half because some part of me needed to see it. The hallway was unusually quiet. My footsteps echoed. As I reached the door, I hesitated. I had my badge, my pen light, my pager. None of them helped steady my breath. I knocked. Nothing. I pushed the door open slowly. The lights were off. Moonlight from the window bathed the room in a soft glow. And someone was sitting in the chair by the bed. I couldn't see her face, but I knew that cardigan. Beige. Worn at the sleeves. Her head was tilted down, brushing something. It took a second to see the outline of a person in the bed, eyes closed, chest not moving. The woman reached forward, gently tucking a lock of hair behind his ear, the same way my mother used to do for Nate when he was sick. I opened my mouth. "Mrs. Lane?" She looked up, slowly, her face pale, eyes wide, but no fear in them. "You're the one who stays," she said softly. My throat tightened. "Why are you here?" I asked, quieter than I intended. Her smile twitched. I never left, and neither did he. The lights flickered. I blinked. She was gone. The chair was empty. The bed was neatly made. No one was there. But on the tray table, another napkin. This one had no writing, just a daisy. I backed out of the room slowly, closed the door, and walked straight to the staff restroom, locking the door behind me. I sat on the closed toilet and stared at the napkin in my shaking hands. Whatever was happening wasn't just some stress-induced vision. I knew what I saw, and something, wanted to be seen. I didn't report it. That night, after seeing her, after seeing them, I finished my shift in silence. There was no protocol for this, no checkbox in the charting software for hallucination or haunting. Besides, I was barely clinging to the job as it was, and part of me thought maybe I'd finally cracked. Divorce, grief, nights alone in echoing hallways, but deep down I didn't think I imagined her, or him. The next evening I walked into the staff lounge and found a folded note in my locker. No envelope, just paper. 509 reassigned, second floor transferring a patient tonight, please prepare room. Charge. My heart sank. I was off rotation for the night, but I couldn't stop thinking about that room. I kept checking the screen at the nurse's station. Eventually, a name popped in. J. Cooper, 63, CHF complications, admitted from ER. Room 509 lit up in green, occupied. I kept watching the clock, watching the hallway. 1 a.m. came, 1:05, 1:10. Then the elevator dinged. It opened, but no one came out. I stood. I don't know what made me walk down that hall again. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe I just didn't want anyone else to walk in blind like I had. As I reached the door, it was slightly ajar. Again, I knocked, pushed it open. Mr. Cooper was asleep, oxygen line in his nose, heart monitor ticking slow but steady. And Violet was back, sitting beside the bed, staring straight ahead. She didn't blink. She didn't look at me. I cleared my throat. Mrs. Lane, you can't be in here. Still nothing. Who are you staying for now? I asked quietly. Only then did her eyes move. Her pupils seemed too wide for the room's light. He's alone, she whispered. They always are. I looked at the man in the bed. He's not Herman. No, she said. But he will be. The air dropped in temperature. The monitor let out a sharp beep. Sudden bradycardia. I moved quickly, stepping past her and checking the machine. His vitals were dropping. I hit the call button. As I reached for the crash cart, I turned to glance back. But Violet was gone. Just the chair. Just the napkin on the floor. I knelt down to grab it as the team rushed in behind me. I stay for the forgotten. By some miracle, we stabilized Mr. Cooper. He lived, but he was moved to another floor later that week. Nobody asked me what happened. Nobody needed to. It's been 5 years since that shift. I left St. Ridge 6 months later. Got a job at a private practice. Days only. Bright, busy, safe. But sometimes, late at night, I'll still hear that elevator ding in my dreams, and I'll see her, Violet, sitting beside a bed, her hands folded, her eyes just watching, waiting for someone who won't come back. I still have those napkins. All 4 of them. I keep them in a box beside my brother's old drawings. I used to think she was a ghost, a remnant, a tragedy that clung to that room. But now I wonder if she was something else. A warning, maybe. Or a reminder. Hospitals treat the body. But people carry pain that medicine can't reach, grief that lingers, love that won't let go, and loneliness so deep it becomes its own kind of haunting. The lesson I learned in room 509 is this: not all who stay behind do so willingly, and not everyone who leaves truly goes. But more than anything, when people are hurting, being present matters more than you think. Sometimes staying, even silently, makes all the difference. Even when no one thanks you, even when no one remembers, because someone always does.